Funding for the Hinckley Report is made possible in part by the George S. and Dolores Story Eccles Foundation and the Cleone Peterson Eccles Endowment Fund.
Tonight on the Hinckley Report, Utah's legislature is in session and the posturing has already begun. What bills are garnering attention? Which issues did the governor focus on in his State of the State address? And in his last opening session speech, Speaker Hughes issues his own call to arms. After a 3-day shutdown and intense partisan feuds, the federal government is once again open. As the dust settles on the shutdown, the tenuous agreement over immigration starts to unravel. What do Utahns think should be done? And will lawmakers listen?
Good evening, and welcome to the Hinckley Report. I'm Jason Perry, director of the Hinckley Institute of Politics. Covering the week, we have Michelle Price, political reporter with the Associated Press, Julia Ritchie, managing editor of KUER, and Kirk Jowers, former director of the Hinckley Institute of Politics. So glad to have you all with us today. A lot of stuff happening in Utah and around the world, but let's start with a very local issue. The governor this week, Governor Gary Herbert, gave his 9th State of the State speech, and it was not quite like some of the others. Kirk, let's start with you. Did you see this as a non-traditional kind of speech for him?
It was, because normally he comes in guns blazing with a few initiatives, and he's going to use that bully pulpit to try to get to get people on board with his initiatives, get some consensus, let people know where he's going, maybe get a little credit on education or other thing. This one, it felt, well, there's a few ways to look at it. One, I think we are living in a bit of an anxious time. Part of that is because of our president. Even in Utah, we see this almost schizophrenia of we're grateful we don't have Hillary Clinton as president, but Trump makes us uneasy. And then we have our Utah issues with the Rio Grande Project, opioids, all these different things. And I think so I think the non-cynical way to look at it is he wanted to be very reassuring to the state, and that things are going well. Utah is on top of things. I think the slightly more cynical way is it did seem like a great way to prop up perhaps Lieutenant Governor Cox for a run in 2020 and kind of establish him as a front runner as people will start thinking about that. And I think the final thing is he did do some nice things with some historic friendly foes like Greg Hughes.
Well, let's talk about that. Michelle, you did some great reporting on this. I know you went and you listened. Let's talk about that one with some call-outs. So promoting maybe Spencer Cox as the next governor for the state, but also calling out a potential next challenger, Greg Hughes. Right. What did you think of the fact that he was calling out people in a positive way, like a friendly way?
I mean, the governor's done this before. He always makes sure to pay a little bit of a tribute to the legislative leaders. But this year, as Kirk mentioned, he didn't run down a list of policies he kind of wants legislators to touch. He seems to be kind of taking a step back to let not only Spencer Cox kind of have room to move in, but also kind of heal the waters a little bit. Standing up there and issuing a list of demands or soft demands for the legislature might not play well when there's already some power tensions simmering this year.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Every politician has to worry about his legacy, and so kind of what I heard on, I think it was Wednesday night, was a governor who is at peace with himself, has found his groove, and is starting to look toward what his legacy will be now that he's, this is his last term.
Oh, that's interesting. Is this him feeling comfortable finally? Like I don't have to really throw out the new initiatives. I can just be the governor. That's kind of what you're feeling.
He also had kidney stones, we should mention.
Oh, there's that too.
He should get the first Teddy Roosevelt Award. Teddy spoke 45 minutes after being shot, and Gary Herbert gave his State of the State.
So many similarities there. It's true. What did you think when you're sitting there listening, Michelle, about this 100-year vision? Because he talked about that, right? What we do now resonates.
Right. Well, I mean, the governor he tends to look back. The Utah's pioneer history has always been a key part of his speech. But looking forward, it was kind of a new direction for him. And I think it's because there's a lot of transformative issues coming before the legislature. Our infrastructure planning, it's not a 2 or 5 year thing. We got to look 20, 30 years down the road. Same with tax reform. So lawmakers are looking at tackling a lot of those big issues and reminding them to have the long scope, which kind of sets the tone for the session.
Last thing on this, Julia. Any initiatives, even though I'm not launching a new one, but of the topics that are going to come up in this legislative session that you think are going to be big?
Well, I think transportation, actually. That's one that he sort of hit on, but they already dropped a draft bill this week looking at revamping the UTA. And so I can really see how he could put a stamp on transportation, especially since that's what everyone's driving up from Utah County. Population is growing. It's putting a lot of strain on our roadways.
That's true. In fact, a bill to put a toll on Little Cottonwood Canyon. Kirk, how are people going to feel about that?
Oh, they'll be furious, of course. All the skiers and outdoor recreationists will be upset. But you see a pretty uniform message from Niederhauser, Hughes, and Herbert of we need to reform our taxes. We're going to lower taxes overall by broadening the base, and this is part of that message. Of course, we have the federal tax reform, which will dramatically impact Utah going forward. And our economy is just changing so much. And so they have to look at new solutions. Whether this is the right one, I don't know.
Well, how will this resonate in your reporting, Michelle? Because the idea was this. People who use the roads should be paying for the roads. That's kind of the new thing with this. How are people going to react to that? Does that idea resonate with them?
I mean, we're gonna see a couple different solutions that lawmakers will try. They're talking about more fees when you register your car every year. There's just different ways to see where are people feeling the pinch and noticing it. If you know you're getting told every time you drive up that road, that might not go so well politically as opposed to, okay, once a year you pay maybe $5 or $10 more than you used to.
Although you may forget, in Virginia, I represented Governor Gilmore, who won in Virginia. He was getting killed, and then he had one slogan, which was eliminate the car tax, and he wiped out his Republican opponent, and then he wiped out the Democrat because people hated exactly that, paying that $800 or $900 back then every time you registered your car.
Interesting.
It got him elected. So.
Okay, Julia, Speaker Hughes got to give an opening session speech. His last one as Speaker, as we understand it, at least in this position, and he called on the state to sue Big Pharma.
Right.
This is about opioids and the addiction. Tell us kind of where he's going with that, what the legislature can do, and a little bit about where the Attorney General will play in this one.
I think Speaker Hughes is playing three-dimensional chess where it kind of only makes sense to the players that are in it, and to all of us we're kind of like, what is he trying to do here? But yeah, during his opening remarks, he kind of hit hard again that opioids are a big problem in the state. We have one of the highest overdose death rates in the country, and he wants to see the state step up individually, and that's a little bit different than what Attorney General Sean Reyes has been kind of angling for. His tact had been to try and join a 43-state coalition, sort of like big tobacco is how he describes it, and they've been doing discovery. I think they're in the discovery phase, and so Speaker Hughes has been trying to get these counties to step up and start suing individually. He thinks that it's a better tactic, I think, to hold opioid makers accountable, and he really took Attorney General Sean Reyes off guard.
Well, how does this work then? So he works on a coalition in this effort, tries to get a settlement for the state of Utah on his own. I guess what he's doing, right? And at the same time, the legislature is saying, no, this is what you're going to do. How's this going to play out?
He seems to be building, the Speaker seems to be building pressure on the Attorney General to just jump into a court battle. And there are a couple states that are taking both routes. There is no need to sit back and not sue while you're doing this 43-state investigation. A couple are involved with both. But so that since the Attorney General isn't filing a lawsuit on behalf of the state, Speaker Hughes has been personally lobbying all those counties and kind of building slow pressure to build this case for him.
Cynically, you could say maybe they both have their eye on the governor's mansion, right, in 2020. And so maybe Speaker Hughes and Attorney General Reyes are, playing chess, as I said earlier.
Oh, we've already named about three of them. It was Cox, Reyes, Hughes. Very interesting how this could play out. But I think we're not done on this exchange with the legislature and the Attorney General. So a bill is out now to kind of change how the Attorney General issues his or her opinions.
Right.
Okay, Kirk, this is just so strange. The governor did not want the opinion out about whether or not he had the authority to do the special election for the congressional district that was not done by statute, right?
Right.
So governor decides, this is how I'm doing it. Legislature, you shouldn't.
Right.
If the opinion said, Governor, you did it right, why didn't he want it out?
And this is the genius of Gary Herbert, I think, because had it gone against him, he should have immediately put it out there because it's going to come out. You know it is, and so you've just got to clean it up and do it. Because it was in his favor, it allowed him to sit back, let it happen. because there's a precedent of going forward. And I think it's a very genuine concern of, if he's going to the AG trying to get this legal counsel and everything is always going to be open to the public, it really constrains his ability to work with that branch and all of those attorneys and all of that institutional knowledge. So I think it worked out very well for Herbert. He was vindicated. He didn't seek to become vindicated by the letter. In fact, he took some arrows for a long time. But I think it's part of this balance of power between the legislative and executive branch.
Okay, Julia, you did a good job last time. The cynical view of that is?
I think of it from, why should the public care about this spat, right? Because it's kind of hard to follow, and I think I kind of disagree with Kirk on that end, that it turned out well for Governor Herbert, but in the end, it was a special election, and I think the public had the right to know whether Governor Herbert was within his authority to conduct that election. So I think there is, Speaker Hughes does have a point. It's a matter of transparency.
And he's now angered the legislature on top of it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, he is as well. And not to mention the fact that the Speaker Hughes and Niederhauser are also talking about maybe we need some legislation that allows us to call ourselves into special session. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, I think the governor still has to sign that legislation when they pass it. So it's going to be an interesting tussle if they make it through. Maybe, if the governor's on his way out, maybe he'll let that become Spencer Cox or whoever else's problem. If Speaker Hughes runs for the governorship, maybe it would be, the governor might think, let's sign that. Let's see how that works out for you.
Interesting.
It's a very healthy debate, but it does really matter. I mean, you look at the different states where you have a weak governor or a strong governor. That is what is being determined with all of these types of bills. It's just this type of stuff that makes the governor just kind of a lackey to the legislature, or is able to control control events. And so I think you will see the governor and probably even the attorney general come down quite strongly against the legislature on some of these types of issues.
Okay.
Which is why Speaker Hughes said it matters that we have a supermajority to override that veto in case
Right, because he knows this is not an easy fight.
So this is just all interesting posturing, right? Because they do have those checks on each other, which makes that State of the State speech even more interesting, how it feels like everyone's so together, but a couple of these issues could be very divisive. But one last one on this that they do seem to be unified on is the Suicide Prevention Task Force. Julia, what is the aim of that, and tell us about the timing?
Well, the CDC, I think Utah had asked the CDC to do this report, but it just came out and kind of tracked youth suicides from, I think, 2011 to 2015 and saw an enormous spike. And it's been getting a lot of attention in the media, and rightly so. And I think Governor Herbert saw that and said, it's time to actually, and I know we joke about task force, we create a lot of them in this state, but this one is bringing together leaders from the Mormon Church, from the business community, lawmakers, to really try to actually maybe implement policies that could, mitigate this crisis.
Okay, let's transition for a moment to some interesting polling. All these candidates are watching these issues, but the number one speculation for many in the state right now, will Mitt Romney decide to run? We've talked about it on this show, but a poll this week puts him at 63%, Jenny Wilson at 18%. Do you think this was going to be that big of a spread, Julia?
I don't do those kind of predictions. So
you're done with that kind of thing?
Yeah, I'm done with polling after the last election. But I think Mitt Romney has been building this slow kind of ground game, and it's just taken him a little longer than maybe he thought it would. But yeah, maybe next week we'll be talking about this again when he's actually thrown his hat in the ring.
Some reports are out there saying it could be next week. Kirk, is this part of the ground game? Is it just a matter of finding the right timing? What's going on there?
Well, the easy thing that's going on there is Senator Hatch, for some good reasons, maybe not some others, but he waited until the 1st of January to announce his intentions. That Mitt Romney has got speaking engagements. He's helping candidates across the country. He's got business engagements. And so he has to continue to schedule and live his life because, as he said, he thought Senator Hatch was going to go again to get those last 2 years of his finance chair. And so I think a lot of it was just scheduling, that Mitt had stuff to do. I mean, he's done a couple of summits here in Utah recently. So I think that's what's going on more than the ground game. He's got a lot of money in the bank that can be used for this Senate run, so that's not an issue. He's got a lot of loyal staffers ready to jump on, a lot of volunteers who are wildly desirous to get going. So he could have declared the day after, but I think he would like to essentially move houses and wrap up all of his private affairs and begin his public affairs.
He doesn't even really need a ground game. I mean, it's Utah. He's going to clean up. He doesn't need to campaign. He could just file, show up at convention, show up on the ballot, and boom, Utah knows him.
Okay, so the polls seem to suggest that's probably true, but is that the right way to do it? I mean, no one's kind of saying we just want a coronation necessarily, or is that just what's happening?
Enough that he won't do that. I mean, you know, there are people who have already started applying the carpetbagger label to him, that they feel like he's too establishment. You know, he is going to have to win over some of those Republicans and bring them into the fold.
I think of it in terms of how I see Senator Mike Lee received at a county or state convention versus how Senator Hatch was received at the last convention. So you do have to placate the hardliners.
Okay, I know we spent a lot of time on this, but there has to be one last question, because Kirk, you were so instrumental in the Count My Vote initiative. The press already talking about the signature gathering process for him. Is there any good counsel on just stick with the signatures for Mitt Romney, or does he go through the gauntlet of the convention, caucus convention system?
It's certainly a discussion. Obviously, he has to do signature. You look at people who are even seen as the darlings of the far right who are now doing signature, because the convention can be so volatile, you know, and what can happen there, and why leave yourself vulnerable to that. I've had a number of discussions with just state house members who have always cleaned up, and they're doing signature as well. I think for Mitt, he's going to have to decide what to do. He is going to get hit at convention, whether he's there to give a speech or whether he's actually going to allow his name to be on there. I'm pretty sure someone is going to run against him, a Trump supporter who's upset with Mitt for being a Trump skeptic. His great speech at the Hinckley Institute that's still played on MSNBC every night.
I think he's got 2 challengers already.
Yeah, so there's going to be a vote there.
There'll be someone out there.
There will be someone who gets more prominent, and they'll love to have the attention of the national press. I don't know that Mitt wants to have a vote that could be seen as embarrassing to people who don't understand what our caucus convention system is.
Okay, let's talk about a race that is close. Oh my. The polls are out now. Mia Love at 47% and Ben McAdams at 42%. This has turned out to be a really close race if it were held today. Right. So, Michelle, talk about this a little bit. Is this what people were expecting, or will this widen a little bit as we get closer to November?
I think it's going to stay pretty tight, especially as we get closer. You know, we've all expected Ben McAdams to run for Congress at some point, and we knew that it would be a close race when he jumped in. You know, at this point, he's still probably looking to get some earned media and wait and start really ramping up his campaign when it's closer to November. We're still quite a ways out at this point.
Okay, how does he capture this? This is such an interesting set of candidates because they're both very well liked, and they're both very well known. That's the thing, right? So Julia, tell us kind of how you think these campaigns are going to go when it looks like Republicans are solidly behind Mia Love, Democrats solidly behind Ben McAdams.
Yeah, so I think I remember we talked about this a little like early on when he first announced that he's really going to have to play to Utah issues, you know, and not maybe bring too much of the national spotlight in, because if you make this about Trump or you make this about national issues, although those will creep into it, you're going to lose, you know, sight of where Congresswoman Mia Love has real strength in the state, right? Is that she's established member of the Republican caucus, and she has a lot of friends in Washington, and she can get things done.
Okay, go ahead, Kirk.
The most interesting thing to me was the Tribune Hinckley Institute poll was almost identical from October till now, and I think if you're Mia, you could look at it optimistically and say Ben's popular. He's now had a few months to, you know, he's done some of these initiatives. It's now getting in people's mind. He could be the next representative, and he hasn't moved at all. So that could be very comforting. On the other hand, she's had a good couple of months as well, and she didn't move at all. And so it's interesting that it just stayed almost exactly static. The Trump thing is going to be very tough for McAdams. Obviously, that's the play of all Democrats against all Republicans, and your poll also showed that Trump is upside down in that district.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Mia did not vote for Trump. She immediately took him on over the Haiti, you know, S-hole country statement, and is taking him on other things. So there's not a lot of space for him to hit her there. So I'll be real curious to see what McAdams does to try to pick up that 5% that he hasn't been able to pick up.
Okay, I want to hit the Trump part for a second. Let me give those numbers that Kirk was referring to and that you were, Julie, as well. In the 4th District, 42% approval for Trump. 56% disapproval. There's already kind of lost on the 4th District. But statewide, 48% approval for Trump, 49% disapproval. Yeah. So interesting. So Michelle, kind of give us the idea here. If there is a kind of this Trump wrapper around a couple of these races, where Utahns are sort of in that range. It's been 48-50 the entire time. How do they navigate that Trump factor?
Right. Well, in this district, this is our most purpley district. There's a lot of people who are still willing to give Trump a chance, even if they're not his biggest fan. They're waiting to see how things will play out. You know, as tax reform starts to take effect, as people's paychecks start changing, we might see those numbers start to move quite a bit.
Okay. This Trump approval gets very close to what's just happened in Washington, D.C. this last week with this government shutdown. And so we want to talk about 3 days worth of shutdown. Kirk, as you've looked at this shutdown, is this a blame game? And if it is, who's going to take it?
Well, the polls show that the Democrats came out slightly ahead if you combine Republican legislature versus Congress and Trump together versus it. On the other hand, because it was so split, I think it ultimately came out as a Trump win. I think, when you look back in history, the one who caves typically loses it in history, and the Democrats lost this one. So I think it was a victory for Trump, victory for the Republicans, and there's a lot of things that have to happen if they want to capitalize on that, but it's a momentary win.
Julie, did the Democrats cave? Is that the perception?
I think there is that perception out there, but keep in mind the shutdown happened over a weekend, so impacts are kind of minuscule. They weren't widely felt, and I think we'll be looking to what happens in the next deadline, right, in a couple weeks here. And I think if another shutdown happens, it could really like flip the table.
Well, that is so interesting, Michelle. So there was a time when you didn't want government to shut down, right? That was a sign of a failure, maybe. But 2013, we have it happen again. Is this a new way of?
It certainly feels like it, right? I feel like Julia's about to say the next shutdown is kind of what we all think in our head.
I think the best part is that Senator Mike Lee voted for a shutdown under both the Obama administration now and the Trump administration.
So there's a constant theme.
At least he's consistent, right?
So is that kind of the strategy right now? Do you think
well, for Democrats, this is their biggest bargaining chip, and actually, there's a lot of people in their base that are upset that they caved. I mean, they see it as a cave. So you've got people on the left and the right feeling like Democrats caved in this instance. So I think you'll see with the next shutdown, if we have another one, they're going to hold on a lot longer and really try to get a deal for the Dreamers under Daga.
Okay, so that's the issue, the Dreamers, right? When you say if they caved, if that's the argument, it was on that, right?
Right.
So the Democrats came out with an agreement to open government up again, saying we would resolve that issue. What's happened, Julia, on that issue for the Dreamers since Monday?
Well, I mean, they've been used as a bargaining chip, so we should say that these are real lives that are at stake here, and especially in our state, we have 10,000 young undocumented immigrants who were brought here to the country when they were young. Some of them are college graduates, they hold down jobs, and so this is why it's becoming an even bigger issue for the McAdams and Love race as well, because these are people that are actually working in our economy right now. So I just want to say there is a human element to this as we talk about who wins and who loses. The immigration issue is really tough, and there are tons of proposals both on the Republican and Democratic side, and I think it's a matter of, we used to have that Gang of 8 a couple of years ago, getting those people back together into a room to really hammer out how we can, get a legal status or some sort of legal documentation for these young people.
Okay. In Utah, 68% of Utahns want these Dreamers taken care of.
Right.
So how does this play then, Kirk? I mean, there's the national scene, and then there's the Utah one. I don't know if we're out of step on that, but it seems that the Dreamers are a unifying group for the country.
That's what I've loved about Utah throughout this immigration debate, which has spanned a couple of decades. George W. Bush, that was one thing he really wanted to accomplish in 2005, was solve some of these things, and he was unable to because of the far right, mostly southern part of the Republican Party. Obama wasn't able to get anything across the goal line. But Utah, we support the Dreamers. We support people who want to be here, who are contributing to our society. But I think Mia Love is very well aware of that, and she from what I've seen, has been out front in being also a supporter of the Dreamers. And so again, she's either in lockstep with with Utah, or she's very smart about not giving herself a place for Ben Adams to hit her.
Okay, we'll talk about the Trump factor in this one as well. So we understand the White House may be putting out an initiative of some sort, or at least a framework on the immigration issue this coming week. Is Trump helping this cause, or is he not? Does he even have a?
Well, at this point, I mean, the deal that we're hearing is that Democrats are agreeing to help pay for the wall. I think it's $25 billion in exchange for working out this deal with the Dreamers. So that seems like a win for the president, because this was a non-starter months ago. And
it was a campaign issue too, right, the whole time, right?
Right.
Julia?
He also said Mexico was going to pay for the wall. So this is one of those like shifting positions where I think Democrats and Republicans have had a hard time nailing down what exactly President Trump wants, because even during the shutdown, as small as it was, like he was, Chuck Schumer was willing to give Trump some money for the wall then, and then he backed out of it. So
and he had a deal with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi,
Yeah.
and then we found out that deal fell apart within a day. So.
Well, we've had great.
The story keeps changing.
We've had people from Trump's administration who have said Trump doesn't really know what he wants to do with this wall, and of course he denies that. But it goes to your point of he's shifting, and so the narrative's going to shift. And
Okay, we'll be watching this one very closely. Thank you for your insights today. That's it for tonight's show. The conversation continues online at kued.org/Hinckley Report. We'll see you next week. Thank you and good night.